Welcome everyone to the inaugural Crypto Finance and Insurance Digital Analytics Summit. The InfoTrust team is absolutely thrilled to be partnering up with Google on this venture as we talk industry trends and more today. And I want to welcome those from the East Coast, so good afternoon. And for those of us on the West Coast, good morning. And for our clients all around the world, we're so thrilled to have you here. My name is Pete Crofut, and I'm the Director of Partnerships here at InfoTrust. We're a global end-to-end analytics and data governance consultancy that works with many of the world's most recognized finance, insurance, and crypto organizations. And it's an honor and privilege to be your guide for today's summit. And we're thrilled to have an all-star lineup of speakers for you today, including Shauna, Gerry, and Ben Fisher from Google, May Alawashi of Gulf Bank, Sam Needham and Michelle Mataranga of Silicon Valley Bank, and Dan Held of Kraken Digital Assets Exchange, he's going to be leading a panel on Web 3.0. And we're really excited for the lineup that we have today. And these speakers will be discussing many important topics relevant to finance, crypto, and insurance organizations. And we'll be talking about Google Analytics 4, which I think is very timely given the recent announcement from Google around the product. And then we're going to be discussing current and upcoming privacy requirements and the importance of server-side Google tag management and the value that can bring to your business. And throughout the day, we're going to be sure to incorporate a break between each of the sessions. So please grab your favorite cup of coffee and tea and let's get started. So obviously, this event would not be possible if it were not for you, our amazing attendees. And here's a snapshot of the many brands represented in our audience today. And we're so thankful to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. And we hope you find value in the coming sessions. And a few housekeeping items before we get started. We're giving away a copy of the Amazon best-selling book that our founders wrote, which is called Crawl, Walk, Run. And we're going to give this book for free to all attendees today. So to claim your copy, fill out a form in the link that's being dropped into the YouTube live chat now. This is also important because it's going to let us know that you are here and attentive. Because remember, we're also giving a Peloton. It's one of my favorite things to see someone win to an attendee at the end of this summit. And we want to make sure that you've watched and participated all the way through the last session. And speaking of participation, we really do have an amazing lineup of speakers here today. So please be active in the chat. You saw the brands that are present. So please feel free to pick the brains of your fellow finance, crypto, and insurance colleagues. We want this to be an engaging session. And finally, let's have fun. So let's get right into it. For our keynote, I'm proud to welcome Shauna, Gerry of Google. Shauna is the head of Google Marketing Platform for Financial Services East and Healthcare, and she leads a team that helps Google's largest advertisers exceed their business objectives by using their durable data combined with Google's enterprise digital marketing technologies. And prior to her current role, Shauna was the global product lead for Google Analytics 360, and she had an amazing responsibility for the commercialization and sales activation of that product and the efforts that went into that globally. And prior to joining Google, Shauna was a category manager covering telecom at Yahoo and search marketing. And prior to that, she was a product manager at Kyocera Wireless. Shauna is a graduate from the University of California, San Diego, and has an MBA from San Diego State University. And when she's not working, she resides in Princeton, New Jersey with her husband and 3 children. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Shauna to the summit. Good morning.
Hi, Pete, and thank you for that great introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. It's so good to see you. You know, Shauna, you and I have known one another for a while, in a previous life, and we partner quite a bit. And I know you're really passionate about Google. So I would love for you to share with the audience a little bit more about what inspires you in the work that you do at Google.
Yeah, definitely. So Pete, as you know, I've been at Google for 14 years now. And one thing that's just been a common thread throughout is this concept of change. Change has been a constant, both within Google, outside, all around us across our industry. And while this can be uncomfortable at times, it also keeps things really exciting and interesting. I love being at the forefront, working on things that are new and different. And I think it's important to have a positive mindset and see change as an opportunity. So the way that Google embraces change and just getting to work with so many of our customers who are also managing through change is certainly something that really inspires me a lot in working here.
Ah, that's fantastic. And you mentioned the word change a few times. And I know that, there's been so much disruption in the ecosystem over the past 2 years. And we're coming out of the world's beginning to think about coming out of and recovering from a pandemic. We're navigating all of these new regulations and industry changes. So when we talk to marketers, it's no surprise that they're expressing concerns, and they feel sometimes they don't have a sure footing around the complexities and uncertainties that lie ahead. From your vantage point, Shauna, how is Google helping customers determine in all of this uncertainty what to prioritize and then how to best prepare for the future?
Yeah, well, the world has definitely changed. We like to think of COVID having acted like a time machine, right? So it brought 2030 to 2020. All of those trends where organizations thought they had more time just got rapidly accelerated. And we're now starting to see this as a good thing. So today's consumers, they have more choice, they have more control than ever before, and they expect personalized content from the brands that they love and they trust. So as marketers, we need to respond and renew trust, thinking about how brands can best connect and meet their current expectations. Because we're in a place today where the world is just going to continue to change. And in fact, we see the velocity of change as just faster than ever, which means the only way to go is forward. At Google, we're anchoring on this great quote by author Seth Godin, which is, "The job isn't to catch up to the status quo, it's to invent the status quo." So if your marketing team is thinking, when can we get back to normal? That's not really an option, right? It's the old way of doing things. We see it creating risk and not value. Or as our Vice President, Sean Downey, likes to say, status quo thinking is a lack of thinking. So Google, we're here to we want to help our customers solve for what's next, for the future. Our goal is to flip the thinking, to not think in terms of risk, but in terms of opportunity. And, we do believe that businesses can prioritize performance and privacy at the same time. That's why we're investing in things like automation, machine learning, first-party data. It's why we're leaning into aggregation, anonymization, on-device processing, and all the other privacy-preserving technologies that are being developed by Chrome in the privacy sandbox to protect identity and information.
Thank you for that. I love the idea of flipping the thinking, not to think in terms of risk, but really the opportunity and upside that lies ahead with all of these exciting changes. And you mentioned modern day consumers, and we at InfoTrust love the idea of starting with what the consumer is doing and helping businesses back into that. And as more consumers expect personalized content from brands, can you talk a little bit more about that and maybe share other key macro trends that you think the audience should hear and that marketers should be paying attention to?
Yeah. Well, just to start, so consumers are just online more, and they rely on digital transactions and e-commerce than ever before. So again, during the pandemic, people came to rely on the internet-connected technologies and services, especially as more and more entered lockdown. We saw 44% of US consumers upgraded their in-home technology during the pandemic. And digital really became a refuge for everyone. And brands had to pivot again to meet customers where they were. So now that the world is opening back up, and consumers don't need to be online as often, but they still want all of those perks that they got used to, things like speed, convenience, accessibility, all of those things that come with living digital first. In fact, according to Amazon, 57% of consumers are shopping online at a higher volume than before the pandemic. And as a result, 2022 is expected to be the first $1 trillion year for online sales, again, largely thanks to COVID-19. So as part of this digital first lifestyle, consumers now have a greater expectation for one-to-one marketing and personalization. We talked about this before the pandemic, where consumers wanted personalization, and now we're in a place where they demand it. According to some recent research that we conducted with McKinsey, 71% of consumers now expect to receive personalized interactions. 76% said that receiving personalized communications was a key factor in their consideration of a brand. And 78% said personalized content made them feel more likely to repurchase or recommend a brand to others. But important to remember that personalization doesn't mean stalking people on the internet based on the last thing that they viewed. I mean, think about how you'd feel, right, if you went to the mall and popped into a Nordstrom, looked at a shoe, but left without purchasing. And imagine what it would feel like if you noticed that as you walked around the mall and went into other stores, grabbed lunch at the food court, that salesperson from Nordstrom was following you around, reminding you to come back and complete your purchase. That would be incredibly creepy, right? And be a huge invasion of your personal space and privacy. Well, the same goes for digital marketing. So brands need to figure out a way to provide personalized experiences while respecting privacy. Third-party cookies were originally designed to let users and websites exchange information and provide good user experiences. But today, because of those same cookies, people just don't know how their data is being used. They're not in control. There's very little transparency and accountability for how it's collected and used. So, again, today's modern consumer, they feel strongly that privacy has become this basic human right and it needs to be respected. 9 out of 10 adults actually believe companies should only have access to their personal data with permission or not at all. And more than 85% of internet users already take some precautions to protect their online information. So just to recap, I'd say the 3 biggest key macro trends are meeting consumers where they are, which is online, providing them with personalized experiences, and respecting their privacy.
Wow, 71% of consumers now expect to receive personalized interactions, and that consumers feel that privacy is a right. That's a really interesting statistic. If we were to drill down a little bit further, so we've talked about macro trends, we've talked a little bit about change. What are some of the key financial specific trends that you see? Because you definitely work with a very broad portfolio of customers. I think the audience would be really interested to hear from your vantage point what you're seeing.
Yes, definitely. So there are 3 key trends that I'd cite that's happening in the financial services space today. First is this increasing expectation of helpfulness, which plays into the concept of personalization. Customers came to expect more online services from their financial institutions due to COVID. They want these fast, frictionless, intuitive, digital-first experiences, and particularly on mobile. So with bank branches and offices that closed during the pandemic, customers got used to the fact that their institution was in their pocket on their phone. They don't want to stand in lines and have a miserable experience. They don't want to go back to that, right? That's just not where the future of financial services is going. So there are big implications and opportunities for finance in the app space. 89% of consumers, in fact, are now using mobile banking, and they're increasingly using their phones to do things like check balances, trade stocks, leverage educational tools, and shop and compare loans too. We also see at Google, finance-related searches in the Play App Store are up 3 times year over year. And now we're even seeing the introduction of what's being referred to as super apps that allow you to do all of your finances in one place. We know PayPal's, for example, is expected to have 25 capabilities in one. And then next is all things related, again, to data and regulation. So there are very big tensions between the need for personalized services and solving for privacy, security, and trust, all in conjunction with each other. And financial institutions, they're just a treasure trove of data, but it still remains this big challenge to be able to use all of that data in a truly personalized way because of the silos that still exist and just the many sort of risk and compliance hurdles that need to be check the boxes for. So as we move into this new privacy world, the spotlight will be on the finance institutions to make sure that they get this right. They are, of course, dealing with some of consumers' most sensitive personal financial data after all. But on a positive note, we see that they are used to complying with regulators, so they do understand and can empathize, right, with the desire by customers to want to protect their data and have more control over what's done with it. And then the third one, which is a real biggie, is just all of the disruption that's happening in finance today. So most of the subcategories within finance have traditional legacy players, some over 100 years old, all trying to innovate, keep up with the consumer and tech shifts that are happening. couple that with emerging disruptive players who really understand these big shifts, and they can often move fast to go after them, but they still have to do so in this highly regulated institutional environment with these legacy brand names. For example, think about traditional banks, right? They now have to compete with the likes of digital natives like Chimes, Veros, SoFis of the world. And these neobanks are really good at delivering on digital services that are helpful. And they're earning trust and gaining market share. We saw Chime, for one, grew its customer base 50% in 2020 to 12 million. And in fact, 8 million of those consider Chime to be their primary bank. And so that puts them at parity or even ahead of some of the more long-standing heritage banks. And then in investing, of course, we still see consumers doing a lot of traditional investing, but now you've got these big new entrants like with crypto that's growing very quickly with the likes of Coinbase and Gemini. So, due to the fact that these newer entrants have grown up in this purely digital world, these emerging brands have tech at the heart of their businesses and their skill sets, and they can often move faster and they're less risk averse. So awareness of, we actually also see awareness of their new services just has never been higher. 83% of consumers are aware of the financial disruption in banking, and 43% of consumers have even adopted a banking disruptor, which is more than double 18 months ago. So as they come onto the scene, we're seeing sort of the scattering of consumers, and it's really become important for legacy brands to focus on maintaining their attention.
Fantastic. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around a customer base for Chime of 50% to 12 million growth, and 8 million of those considering that the bank their primary bank is really interesting statistic. And I think that goes to show how much disruption is happening in the market. And because there is so much disruption, because there's so much technology, lots of different narratives coming at marketers, how do you suggest that marketers respond to these trends that you've unpacked for us?
Yeah, so again, as the ecosystem around us accelerates, marketers, they need to accelerate too. So evolution is all around. It's the way of the world. Before there were smart cars, there were horses and buggies. Before there was digital, there was print. Before programmatic, there were just regular banner ads. And we're now calling this acceleration phase of marketing, modern marketing. And modern marketers, they keep up with the times in order to stay relevant and profitable. And this is why many brands are turning to a concept of digital transformation as a path forward. This means they're putting the right, technical, organizational capabilities in place to be more agile and build resilience for the future. Those companies that are less digitally mature, they still mostly rely on third-party data for their marketing. And with limited first-party data, they're not able to connect online and offline touch points, making it just harder to understand their customers. Digitally nascent companies, they're also less likely to use advanced tools like cloud-based analytics or machine learning. And even when they do have the right data or tools in place, they often lack the resources required to drive success. But on the other hand, modern marketers are the ones who realize the best way to navigate disruption and challenge is to invest in advancing their digital maturity. And so they're the ones that are embracing data and technology in order to meet consumer needs and drive impact.
That's really interesting. And you brought up a very good point about before programmatic, there were banner ads. It was part of that revolution that happened. And, a lot of marketers at that time were have these definitions thrown at them. And I think that the term digital marketing or digital marketing transformation can be very broad. And so as a concept, and that concept can be overwhelming of transformation for customers, I've heard marketers tell us, hey, Pete, in InfoTrust, where do I even start? Now, can you help us break it down where marketers should focus their time and really their efforts in order to start this transformative journey?
Absolutely. It is a lot, and it can be overwhelming and consuming, right? We've been looking at this for several years now at Google, and it's taken us some time too to really break it down. But we've gotten to a point where we now try and help our customers prioritize what they need to do by boiling it down into 3 pillars. And the first is just connect. 3 simple pillars. Connect, right? Connect your data sources, connect your internal teams and your marketing partners to set them up to be able to unlock incremental value. And then use your own first-party data to connect with your customers and find new ones like them. Second is innovate, right? So innovate by expanding your data signals and leaning into sophisticated machine learning to boost performance. Customize audiences and bid strategies based on what drives value specifically for your business. In fact, strategies like automated targeting, value-based bidding and modeling can actually be more effective than one-to-one targeting. And then third and finally is super important to make experimentation a part of your organization's DNA. So modern marketing is based on being agile, right? Doing things differently, trying new things, and then continually iterating to find out what is really best that works for you. And now is a great time to test new approaches because some cookies still do work. So now is a great time to test in order to compare and see, identify what solutions might work for you in the future. So again, having this like everything is a test mentality will be critical to success. And over time, we think that small gains or even small losses will ultimately result in big wins.
So would you say that failing fast is important in this as well for marketers in this mentality of change and test and iterate?
That's exactly right, right? Having that agile, nimble mindset definitely includes failing fast. We want to empower folks at your organization to not be afraid to fail because that is part of having an experimentation mindset.
And what would you say, Shauna, that brands have to gain from transformation, right? When we talk to them, they're very complex. There's lots of moving parts, both internally, multiple partners. So, what would you say from your vantage point that they do have to gain? And I'd be really interested to hear that.
Yeah, so we have, spent a lot of time looking at the data on this, and it is pretty clear. Digital mature companies, they do outperform their less mature peers. Companies that are able, again, to be nimble and can transform quickly are seeing big rewards. We have new BCG research that was done just earlier this year that found that more mature brands increase their sales by an average of 18 percentage points more than their less mature peers and boosted cost efficiencies by an average of 29 percentage points. And they outperform a market share as well. So looking at that data, we've seen more than twice as many digitally mature brands increase their share in the past year by 3 percentage points more on average than the lower mature brands.
That's fascinating. Well, in that, who would you say is doing well? Or can you comfortable sharing an example of a fin services client that you would classify as a modern marketer?
Well, rather than talk about specific clients, let me address what we see best-in-class marketers actually doing well. So one thing is just we've discussed is the need to meet consumers where they're at. So from a brand perspective, we see best-in-class marketers investing in connected TV, right, due to changing viewing habits, for one example. We've also talked about the importance of first-party data and evolving this evolving ecosystem. And the most common way that we see financial services marketers using their own data is by applying machine learning and creating predictive models to generate new insights and then bring those back into our ecosystem for smarter marketing. So there's really 3 most common machine learning use cases in finance and just 3 ways of activating on that data. So I'll mention the use cases first. Most commonly, right, is predicting a customer lifetime value. So company uses their first-party CRM data, typically combined with Google Analytics data, to create predictive lifetime values. And this is especially important in finance when we often see conversions still happening offline or they have a long delay. Second is predicting churn, or who's most likely to switch or leave your institution. So especially if you think about going back to that idea of the new digital natives who are challenging the more traditional incumbents, it's critical to know who is most at risk of leaving and then market to them differently. And we also see the reverse of this. So predicting likely converters. So when customers are actually in the market to make a change, how can we predict who's most likely to do so and then capitalize on that? And then third is a measurement application that we refer to as regression-based attribution. Now, media mix modelings are of course still hot, but with third-party cookies going away, multi-touch attribution models are having a lot of gaps. So we've actually seen success in partnering with customers to build essentially cookieless statistical models that still leverage offline conversion from back-end sales databases, but they stitch users together based on new things like geographies or day of week instead of cookies in order to measure the value of the different channels. And this is obviously less granular than the old way based on users, but it is certainly more granular and can be more frequent than traditional media mix models. And then just to quickly touch on the 3 ways to activate this kind of data. First is for audience targeting. So for those customers who are able to create those propensity audiences for likelihood to churn or convert, or even by grouping lifetime value into segments like high, medium, low, they can target them directly through features like customer match and expand for prospecting with things like similar audiences. And then second, from audiences would be bidding, right? So automated bidding, where you can predict lifetime value at the time of conversion and use features like value-based bidding in search or custom algorithms in display and video, and then automate bidding towards more precise predicted values instead of static CPAs. And then thirdly is thinking about those insights to inform strategy. So we mentioned regression-based attribution, which provides some obvious opportunities for optimization across channels, but lifetime value and predictive models also provide really interesting insights with respect to measurement. So thinking about like what of those high value customers, what actually are their common attributes and how can we use some of those learnings or insights to then adjust our strategy based on that information.
So, Shauna, thank you for unpacking that. And we also hear quite a bit of customers asking about customer lifetime value, starting with that and the importance. So I think that using first-party and CRM data combined with Google Analytics data really helps them do that. And leaving this, as we're starting to wrap up here, if we were to look at the Wall Street Journal and look at the headlines 12 months from now, what would success look like? And really, what would you ask of our audience today? What would you like for them to learn or do at the end of this session?
Yeah, great question. So first, I hope that if they, only remember one thing or take away one thing, that they'll remember just the concept of modern mindset and all that that means, and just embracing that concept. So then hopefully that will help you thinking, for example, if you have or your organization has sort of this more limited privacy safe vision, and maybe it lacks a really crystal clear understanding of how to deliver responsible marketing strategies, then from that, think about working on really defining a vision and a future-proof strategy, and having a detailed roadmap. We talk a lot about roadmaps, tech roadmaps here at Google, which details out how you're going to get there. And so that's something that would hope that you would embrace as again part of that modern mindset. Similarly, if you have kind of those siloed functional areas, maybe they have long-standing processes that are making execution harder than it needs to be. We hope that you'll evolve those and become more agile. Again, going back to that test and learn culture, which takes time. It can be a big change at an organization. And maybe ideally even have dedicated resources that can help enable cross-functional collaboration. But Pete, as you mentioned, like some of this can be overwhelming. Another thing to remember is there is no need to do it all alone. Here, we want our customers to lean into their external expertise that's available. So through partners, of course, like Google and InfoTrust, together we have a lot of brain power that can help our clients guide them in new ways of thinking, innovative strategies. We can develop learning agendas together and introduce experimentation best practices. So, I would just say, remember, the ecosystem isn't going to go backwards. We're going to continue to evolve. You need to wake up every day, and we have to do the hard work of adapting to the changing circumstances that are all around us and constantly reinventing our businesses to stay relevant and useful to customers. So on that note, I hope that folks will leave here today and just be really focused on having that modern mindset, the positive mindset, and being focused on the opportunity that lies ahead.
Follow-up question on one of the things that you mentioned, right? I've heard this saying is that perfection is the enemy of progress. One could also argue that silos are the enemy of progress as well. Do you see more marketers being open to, from your conversations and your team's conversations with customers, being more open to looking at how they're internally organized so that they can be more agile and rapidly transform their businesses using technology? Are you seeing more advertisers leaning into that, or are we still having the same conversations of like, hey, you're not quite there yet, but we need to get you?
I mean, yeah, we have been having those conversations for a long time, right? It's definitely not a new challenge. But we do see organizations leaning in. We get asked a lot to talk about organizational change. Like, what does good look like? What are the types of models that we should consider? And we love having those conversations with our clients. We always learn in those sorts of settings. So yeah, I do think they're more open and willing to have these conversations, but it is a journey. It takes time. And so again, it's going back to that concept of having a detailed roadmap. The roadmap isn't always about the tech changes that need to happen, but sometimes they're to do with organizational structure as well. So how can we take small steps towards that?
And that's where I'm imagining partners are helpful as well,
Mhm.
as Google is around advising that. This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much again from the InfoTrust family for making time today. We have a few more minutes before we wrap up, and we've had a question, and so if you're up for it, we'd love for you to get your take on a question from the audience. So the question is, we love making experimentation as a part of the DNA. Taking a step back, do you have any suggestions as to how a person could become a digital transformation champion within their company, especially within the financial services industry? Can you talk a little bit about that and your experience where you've seen internal champions?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's hard, right? Because you might know, you're one person at an organization and this is important. So how do you bring it forward and start to kind of light the fire? The first thing that comes to mind for me is I guess, focus on the small wins. Like, they don't have small wins along the way can ultimately lead to big successes. And one thing that we see is maybe figuring out like maybe it's a single line of business or a single geography, or maybe there's a place within your organization that makes the most sense to start, right? For whatever reason. Could be the people resources that you have there, or the leadership is more open to change, and try and find that first test, right? Define the experiment and get it started in one place. And it might seem small at first, but then you can start to take those successes, have a really well thought out, documented test set up from the beginning, so that you have great data to then take and kind of amplify and tell that drumbeat throughout your organization, and then make recommendations for where you might take it next. So I guess that would be, in summary, just start thinking about starting small and not trying to bite off anything too big to begin with.
And are there any best practices in terms of below the line decision making, right, and the C-suite, to connect those two? In other words, is the buy-in from the C-suite also important in this?
Absolutely. I think it's critical. I think we need, you need to have the champion at the C level for sure. Like, they need to be the advocates. They can help remove roadblocks, open doors for you. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And thank you for the person who submitted that question. It's fantastic. And to wrap up today, it really sounds like change, Shauna, is a constant both within Google and across our industry, that modern consumers really have more choice, which is super exciting, than ever before. And they really do expect personalized contents from brands that they love and trust. So as marketers, it sounds like we need to respond and renew that trust, and companies should more or less prioritize performance and privacy at the same time, because really it sounds like consumers expect more from marketers in terms of one-to-one personalization. In fact, it sounds like from what you had mentioned that they really demand it. So, as we are in a modern marketing world now, I think that comes with a need and responsibility for modern marketers to navigate this disruption and challenges. And it really sounds like investing in advancing your digital maturity and making sure that you have the right partners and data to do that will lead to significant improvement in business results. And again, we really appreciate your time, your experience, and your perspective today. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us.
Thank you as well, Pete.
You bet. Thanks, Shauna. Take care.